The vengeful spirit of the graveyard. It was a silent night, and the air carried an eerie chill. The town of Rajgarh had a legend, a cursed graveyard where a vengeful spirit wandered, searching for those who dared to disturb her eternal rest. But Vishal, Shekhar, and Rahul were skeptics. To prove their bravery, they made a reckless bet to visit the graveyard at midnight and spend at least 30 minutes there. As the clock struck 12, they reached the rusted iron gates of the graveyard. A cold breeze blew past them, sending shivers down their spines. The place was ancient, its tombstones cracked and covered in moss. The faint scent of damp earth and decayed flowers filled the air. Their phone flashlights flickered as if protesting against their foolish decision. Just stories to scare people, Vishal said, trying to sound confident. But deep inside, all three of them felt uneasy. With hesitant steps, they moved deeper into the graveyard, their shoes crunching over dried leaves. Every now and then, the wind howled through the trees, creating ghostly whispers. Suddenly, Rahul stopped. "Did you hear that?" he asked in a shaky voice. A soft, distant wailing echoed through the air. It was faint but filled with sorrow and pain. It seemed to be coming from behind an old, large tombstone. "Probably just the wind," Shekhar muttered, though he didn't believe his own words. Gathering courage, he stepped forward and placed his hand on the tombstone. The moment his fingers touched the cold, rough surface, a piercing gust of wind howled through the graveyard. Their flashlights blinked uncontrollably, and an eerie silence followed. Then, they saw her. A woman stood a few feet away, dressed in a tattered white sari. Her long, unkempt hair covered most of her face, but her blood-red eyes burned with rage. Blood dripped from them, leaving dark stains on her pale skin. Her feet hovered above the ground, and her body swayed unnaturally, as if she were being controlled by an unseen force. "Leave this place," she whispered, her voice echoing from all directions at once. Vishal, Shekhar, and Rahul stood frozen, unable to scream, unable to move. "Leave, or die." With a sudden, unnatural speed, the spirit rushed toward them, her arms stretching unnaturally long, her mouth opening wide in a horrifying scream. The air around them turned ice cold, and an unbearable pressure crushed their chests. That was all they needed. Snapping out of their terror, the three friends turned and ran as fast as they could, their hearts pounding against their ribs. As they reached the graveyard's gate, Rahul risked a glance back. The spirit stood at the edge of the graveyard, staring at them. But she didn't follow. She simply watched. They didn't stop running until they reached their homes. That night, none of them spoke a word about what they had seen. But when they searched for the history of the graveyard the next day, their blood ran cold. Years ago, a young woman named Mira had been brutally murdered and buried in that graveyard. The villagers had ignored her cries for help, and since then, her restless spirit had haunted the graveyard, punishing anyone who dared to step foot inside after midnight. From that night on, Vishal, Shekhar, and Rahul never stepped out alone at night. Because some fears are not just stories, some are real.